Howdy lads! For a long time, my favorite puzzle game was far and away Baba Is You. It's a super interesting concept with super interesting puzzles executed super well, and I truly believed nothing could usurp Baba's throne. But then a few months ago, Animal Well kicked down the door, slapped Baba Is You in the face, and gave me a big ol' kiss on the lips. And from that point on, I had eyes only for Animal Well, and I want to talk about why. I'm not going to spoil much, but if you haven't played either of these games, go play them. They're best experienced blind. I've been replaying both of these games in order to make this video, and in a way, it almost feels unfair to even compare the two. Because Baba Is You is a puzzle game in the truest sense. There are levels, and every level is a puzzle with all the pieces clearly provided, and when you beat enough levels, you win. Animal Well is a puzzle in the sense that it tells you absolutely nothing and makes you figure out everything for yourself. But it is without a doubt a puzzle game. The core mechanics all revolve around puzzles, and if you don't solve at least some of them, you're not going to beat the game. The difference lies in its presentation. The first thing you'll notice when you play this game is without a doubt the atmosphere. It is magical. The second you load in, you hear the sounds of water pooling beneath you and the chirping in the distance, making you subtly question if you're literally in an animal well. These bridge blocks have distraught faces carved into them as you pull them from the dark water below, and stone animals are scattered throughout the environment. It just makes me want to put a tent down in this place and just live here. And it was those details that just immediately hooked me, and it made the puzzles that followed just so much more exciting. Nothing, and I mean nothing, looks, sounds, or plays quite like Animal Well on the market today. Probably because it was just made by one dude, Billy Basso. He made the engine, sound, graphics, all of it, and I think that does wonders to lend to Animal Well's distinct feel. But this is my favorite puzzle game, so let's talk about the puzzles. Well, for starters, I can actually complete them. Don't get me wrong, both of these games have puzzles that a guy like me has no hope of ever completing on my own. But unlike Baba Is You, where there's relatively little to differentiate which puzzles are solvable and which are excruciatingly difficult other than the number going from 8 to 9, Animal Well doesn't even tell you there's a puzzle there. So a guy like me walks right past, whereas an actually smart person realizes there was a hidden code in a pillar or something and unlocks some piece of a secret. I don't think that's actually a puzzle in the game, but there are definitely ones very similar to that. Either way, to me, having the ability to completely miss optional puzzles early on is fantastic for a couple reasons. The first is so players don't get overwhelmed and scared off by the harder puzzles, and the second is because once you complete the game, you come back to all the areas again and realize there was so much more to do than you ever thought. And the game does give you subtle hints as it progresses to signify where those puzzles you missed might be, but that's all I'll say to avoid spoilers. It's kind of like how in Mario Odyssey, after you beat the game, a bunch of new moons spawn for you to discover in the kingdoms you've already explored. But in this game, the moons were already there to begin with, and you just walked past them 20 times without the possibility ever even crossing your mind that they could have been there in the first place. And the crazy thing is, these puzzles are super easy to miss, and yet the necessary puzzles communicate so clearly to the player exactly what needs to happen to progress without a word. Take this door, for example. What if 3 circles light up when this yellow button is pressed? Most people can immediately realize, oh, probably gotta figure out a way to hit those other 2 yellow buttons in order for it to open. Obviously, the main puzzles get much more complex than that, and yet I never felt confused as to what I needed to do in order to finish any of them. I certainly had to think about it, and struggled at times, but what needed to happen was always something I just got, you know? Plus, when there were puzzles I struggled with, I would just go in a different direction, because there's tons of directions you can go and explore. And along the way, you might find a tool or something that helps make the puzzle you were stuck on a whole lot easier. I know it sounds like I'm sponsored by Animal Well right now, but I'm not. I did feel like some of the backtracking and like travel options were a little bit too difficult to figure out in some areas, but traveling through this place is just so fun. I can hardly even complain about that. The tools I mentioned also add a humongous sense of variety throughout the game. Sometimes, you can find ways to solve puzzles or reach a new area without getting the seemingly necessary item to do so, making you feel like you somehow tricked or broke the game, only to realize the game totally wanted you to do that, and was actually tricking you into teaching yourself a more complicated mechanic that might get used down the line. But you never realize that in the moment. And as a result of these cleverly constructed and clearly communicated puzzles, I was able to beat Animal Well while feeling like a big, smart boy, even though I had barely scratched the surface of what the game actually had in store for me. And once you scratch that surface, it is nearly impossible not to dig deeper into the well, which is why Animal Well is my new favorite puzzle game.